South fans, we've come away with a 0-0 draw here at the Serbian Sports Centre against the Altona Magic in what was our second match of today. Of course, earlier at 12 p.m, we played the Green Gully. I wasn't able to attend the game against Green Gully. My father was in attendance. I also spoke to a couple of people here at the ground who went to the game. I also spoke to Liram Almazi, whose feedback actually was that we played really well, that Jared Tyson, the Green Gully goalkeeper, had a really good game for Gully, and that we created 4 or 5 good chances. So that was actually good to hear. My father's feedback was that the team looked like they were well drilled, they were playing attractive football, they were working hard. So that was good to see. Certainly here at the Serbian Sports Centre. I'll go through, for example, which players were present. We saw Jerry Salados participate in the warm-ups, the early warm-ups. My understanding was he did play against Green Gully. Unfortunately, he limped off maybe about 5 or so minutes before the game started. Didn't look like a serious injury. Was obviously still walking, would have been in some sort of discomfort. Maybe it's a muscle-related injury. Obviously, Jerry is very important to South Melbourne's plans this year, so hopefully we can nurse him back and hopefully he can play a couple more preseason games before round 1 against Heidelberg. Nick Chrysaradis, my understanding, is injured. He was not present here at the Serbian Sports Centre. I assume he wouldn't have, been present at the game against Green Gully earlier today as well. But Zach Bates, he was here. He didn't kit up or go through any warm-ups. I'm guessing he's carrying some sort of injury. Marcus Schroen is in the same boat, was here. He didn't go through the warm-ups. Apparently he might be a couple of weeks away. Not sure what his injury is, but he's obviously nursing something. We saw here at Altona the likes of Almazi, as I mentioned earlier. I spoke to him. We saw Daniel Clark, Sawyer. They were here. Obviously, they played against Green Gully, though, and didn't participate in the game against Altona Magic. We had Pierce Clark, and who's our new goalkeeper, and also Perry Lambropoulos, not present from what I saw. They may have been here. I apologise if they listen to this and say, we were there, but I didn't see them. They did play against Green Gully, though. And Melvin Beckett, I also didn't see. But yes, he also played against Green Gully. So as you can see, South fans, we have a number of players obviously made, themselves available and ultimately saw South Melbourne compete in 2 games over the space of a day, which is something that we haven't really seen to date. But when I really break it down and think about it, it's probably not a bad way, especially if you have a really deep squad, which undoubtedly we do this year, in order to get minutes into the players' legs, which I think is going to be very important. Throughout the season, and even just for competition in places, having a squad so deep, I think that first round, it's still unknown as to exactly who those first 11 players will be, and because the competition would be so strong, you need to get minutes in those players' legs. So if they're called upon, they're ready, or even just to essentially, just ensure that, you've got 15, 16, 17 players who are competing for those 11 spots, that they've all played, 3, 4, 5, good, solid games of preseason football before we get into round 1. So our starting 11 was Nikola Reganovic. We had Brad Norton on the left. Irish signing Stephen Follan, who I must say for me was our man of the match today. Under-20s captain Georgi Zabos joined him, in the central defensive pairing. Amadou Karoma right back. Absolutely great to see Amadou back. He's a player that when I think back, look, obviously, no doubt he's developed his game a little bit further since he left South Melbourne at the end of the 2016 season. But, he's a physical specimen. He goes up and down. He's strong. He's got good technical ability. We also saw him on the right-hand side of the fence directing, the various young players where to position themselves. So he has some leadership traits as well, which was great to see. Luke Pavlou, welcome back, Luke. Luke Pavlou played in defensive midfield position. Youngster Matthew Lutraka has started more advanced, I'd say, midfield role. Don't think it was a clean attacking mid. My understanding is Lutrakas also played a part in the Green Gully game earlier today. We had Irwin taking up a position, I think, on the left-hand side of the front 3. Peter Skapetis as the striker. We also had a two under-20s players actually in the starting lineup. We had one player who I believe we've signed from Hume City. That was certainly the word here at the ground. I think his name is Huss Saglam. Played on the right of midfield. And actually probably played 60 or 70 minutes. I assume, whilst I can't be certain, obviously he's a young player. I assume he's going to be an under-20s player that, might be training with the seniors. He actually looked quite technically competent, played a good solid 60, 70 minutes, if not more today. So, certainly an interesting player, and certainly shows that probably under-20s this year are going to be, quite strong again. Another 20s player that played in the starting lineup was Sasha Murphy, I believe. He may have also had some minutes against Green Gully. I think he lined up on the left side of midfield. Very technically competent player. But as you can see, our starting 11 here had a mixture of under-20s players, or players that have been promoted to senior squad who are still technically, I guess, under 20 or maybe just 20, and also some very experienced players, and certainly of interest to South Melbourne. New signings, Folan, Karoma, Pavlu, and Irwin all started in today's encounter. So in general, I'd say, playing at the Serbian Sports Centre, we didn't play on the main ground. We played on the side pitch to the left-hand side of the main building, which was in decent nick from a, I guess, grass cover perspective. Did have, unfortunately, a few bumps on the pitch, but in general, players were able to play football. But where it was a little bit unfortunate was obviously the ground isn't surrounded by many trees, and also having the actual building essentially right next to it, within 3 or 4 meters, really creates a weird wind effect if it is windy. And unfortunately, just before the game started, there was a huge wind that was favouring South Melbourne, but was cutting towards one side. So you'd see the Altona, goalkeeper or their central defenders try to clear the ball, and the wind would immediately take it, towards the right-hand side. So, that made playing conditions certainly a little bit difficult. So I'd say that, because Altona was going, up against such a strong wind, they are also a relatively new squad. I spoke to, someone from there, I'm guessing from the committee or maybe a long time supporter. He noted to me that, there was only like 3 players from last year. I think Vidakangas in goals. They had Litvin returning from a knee reconstruction, and up front, obviously, they had the Netherlands striker, the striker that is their number 10, who scored a few goals last year at the beginning of the National Premier League's Victoria season, that unfortunately, was out with injury. He's a player, I think, who, if serviced well, is capable of scoring 10 to 15 goals. He started today. So, in that first half, I think South Melbourne, it's fair to say, dominated possession. There wasn't really any clear-cut chances for either teams. Even throughout the whole match, there weren't too many clear-cut chances. The best chance, though, in the first half came after Saglam, the youngster that we've signed from Hume, put in, a great cross from the right, just over the Altona Magic defender's head. Fell to Skapetis at the back post. He's probably around 8 to 10 yards out. He chose to try control it, then shoot. Unfortunately, that control wasn't good, and then he wasn't able to shoot. I think if he went first time, if he had it again, obviously it's easy to say with hindsight, if he went first time and connected, Vidakangas would have had pretty much no chance to save it. Unfortunately for Skapetis, also it's worth mentioning, probably after 20, 25 minutes, he had a bit of a knock, coming together with a player in the middle of the park. He seemed a little bit ginger after that, so I think hopefully as a precautionary measure only, Coach Esteban Quintas took him off, and he saw no further time. It's also worth noting that in the second half, South fans, we had an even more youthful team. I think at one point, if I work through the youngsters that found themselves on the park at the same time, we had obviously Zarbos, who played a full 90 minutes next to Folan. Lutrakis, I think he only played one half, so in the second half, I don't think he featured. Jaden Iliovsky featured both in the first half and second half. Very, very good performance from Iliovsky, I'd say. Physically, he's a bit stronger, I'd say, than your average player for his age. I'm guessing he's 17 or 18. And in that central midfield role, he looked quite busy, looked quite confident on the ball. Certainly, a very talented player. Striker Sam Moramus came on. He had a couple of good moments in the second half, which we'll talk about soon. Sasha Murphy, who had started, also played in the second half. A youngster called Corbin Baker, I believe, who may have played against Green Gully, right winger, also came on later in the second half. Saglam, the player that we've signed from Hume, as mentioned, also played in the second half. And Yanni Panakos, quite a, I guess, technical young player. Looked probably the youngest player out of all the under-20s. I don't know, I'm guessing 16 or 17, probably 16, I'd say, if someone was to, offer me financial compensation to get that right. Again, very good technical player, probably needs to develop himself a little bit more physically, had a couple of good moments. But yeah, as you can see, at one point we had, I think 7 players in the second half who were, under the age of 20 or 20, maybe Zarbos might be 20. I'm thinking he's 19 going on to 20. But yeah, very, very young team. And that meant in the second half that there was a lot more pressure on the South Melbourne defence. There wasn't really any super clear-cut chances for Altona Magic that I can remember. We did have goalkeeper Josh Doran play a full 45 minutes in the second half. And to be fair, he showed a couple of moments which was, for me, quite promising. One moment in particular where he owned the box quite confidently. Certainly someone of his size and stature, I think, should be doing that regularly. And yes, I guess between the likes of Folan and Karoma in particular, they managed to get the South Melbourne youngsters through the match, absorb most of the pressure. Folan in particular, there was a couple of times later in the second half where Georgie Zarbos made a mistake, and Folan was able to, put his body in an immaculate position, almost wedge himself and slide at the right moment to stop a very dangerous moment for Altona. And really take pressure off Zarbos. It's great to see that such a talented young South Melbourne player is able to play in matches like this, next to such an experienced European player like Folan. So that was certainly the rhythm of the second half. We did have a couple of good moments with, early on in the second half when Norden did start. I'd say he probably played about 60 to 70 minutes. In the 49th minute, he did a superb run down the left, went past 2 or 3, I think it was 2 players actually, in a very similar vein to his form in 2016, where for me that was, an amazing year for. I think he's been suffering from niggling injuries. I think today his body looked in good condition, and he went past those 2 players, laid it off to Maramis, a youngster from the under 20s, who probably could have taken the ball into the box, but he chose to lay it back to Norden, who shot, from about probably 16 yards out, just inside the box, didn't fully connect, didn't force a save from Vitikangas. That was one of our better moments. Then in the 78th minute, Maramis, the young striker, had the ball on the left-hand side of the box, worked a couple of touches, including probably a flick to himself onto his right foot. Very, very intricate play, I'd say. Unfortunately, his right foot effort, probably from about 10 yards, which was kind of like a volley, I guess, blazed over the bar. And that was probably, Norden's chance and Maramis' chance were our only solid chances of the half. Altona, as I said, had similar half chances. No keeper had to make an absolutely brilliant save. But overall, we saw today that South Melbourne has, over 2 games, a very, very strong squad, very, very good young talent as well. It's going to be exciting to see how our preseason develops. My understanding is we might have matches next Friday at St Albans at 7:30, and also again at a similar time here next week, the Serbian Sports Centre, I think against Brunswick City. Wait for the club to confirm that. That is something that I heard around, so I can't be certain 100%. But certainly South fans, I can't wait to see more of this team. I'm looking forward to next week to see them playing again. And I'd say bring on the 2020 National Premier Leagues of Victoria season. Go South!